Welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast with your hosts, Joshua Poniatowski and Alex Taylor. Let's talk football.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast. My name is Joshua Poniatowski, and I'm here with the late, great Alex Taylor. What's going on, Alex?
What up? Excited for today's episode. Should be a good one.
You know it's going to be great. So today we're going to be talking about one guy at each position. Last week we talked about fades that we didn't like at their ADP, so we're going to do the opposite this week. We're going to talk about guys we do like at their ADP and kind of share a little bit of information as to why. But before we do that, we're going to jump into the news around the league. While camps are going on, rumors are flying about rookies and all the stuff that's happening. We decided to go a little bit different direction this week. Talk about contracts, things that are true and have been solidified. Contracts can definitely have an impact in fantasy, definitely in dynasty, but even in redraft, as far as the confidence goes with the coaches, the GMs, and even the players. So we're going to jump into the first contract being Tua. He's on a 4-year, $212 million contract. He was the third highest paid QB for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, and then immediately after that, Jordan Love signed a 4-year, $55 million contract, $75 million signing bonus. I mean, for 1 year of production, played 8 good games. How are we feeling about that? Like, what are your thoughts on Jordan Love?
Yeah, I mean, both are probably an overpay. I mean, just from like what their skill standpoint is, but they both pretty much have to make that just because of the value of the quarterback position. I don't think either of them have done enough to warrant all that money. Especially like Jordan Love, kind of just that's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
One kind of thing I thought was kind of funny. Everyone kind of loves, Green Bay's mindset of drafting a QB way ahead and letting him build up. But the problem is then you don't get the advantage of the cheap rookie deal. Like you look at San Fran where they're paying Purdy fucking nothing, and then but instead they're just Green Bay's immediately paying a ton of money to Jordan Love, with only really getting 1 year on the rookie deal. So.
Right. And I mean, we see quarterbacks flash and maybe not do so great the following year. So, I guess we'll see with Jordan Love, but he got paid, got his money. So they're going to build around him. I think they have one of the youngest teams in the league. So from a dynasty standpoint, got to be some confidence there if you like Jordan Love.
It was nice that Jordan Love, got better at the end of the season. It wasn't like he started strong and then kind of cooled off. He kind of seemed like he was figuring it out a little bit. So that's, that kind of gives you the hope. But we'll have to see what happens.
I mean, they let him throw the ball. That was the biggest thing. Like, they were playing some of the worst pass defenses in the league, and they were trying to run the ball with Aaron Jones constantly. It was so frustrating to watch. But then towards the end of the season, of course, after I dropped him in redraft, they started to let him throw the ball more consistently. So yeah, that was definitely a good sign. More confidence going into the next year, so he can definitely produce and do what he did again previous year. And then the last contract we got is DJ Moore, 4-year, $110 million contract, $82 million guaranteed, which is a super high number. It's the largest contract in Bears history ever. So including quarterback, including anybody that they've ever signed. Yeah, crazy.
Wow. Even bigger than like when they had Khalil Mack. Like, I mean, he had to be getting a bunch. But
yeah, I think Montez Sweat was number 2 or something like that. They paid him a lot of money. But yeah, this is the largest Bears contract in history of the franchise.
I mean, he was their offense last year, and he was making, taking nothing and turning it into something. He would just take a little screen pass and all of a sudden pop it for a 60-yard touchdown. So he's an electric player. Excited, happy for him. Kind of excited to see what this new Bears offense is going to look like.
Yeah,
very revamped from last year, so should be fun.
I feel like they built around Caleb, right? He's got a lot of weapons this year, but it's also smart. Like DJ Moore has 2 years left on his 3-year extension. So it sounds strange that they restructured and re-signed him, but imagine 3 years from now what the wide receiver, or maybe 2 years from now what the market looks like and the costs. And, they were like, all right, we're going to give Caleb his guy for at least 3 years, in 3 to 4 years and not have to pay him as much as we were to wait.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you look at, everything, it just goes up every year constantly. You look at Patrick Mahomes
Const-
signed that huge
yeah,
contract, and the time was nuts. And now it's like you look back and Patrick Mahomes isn't even like a top 10 paid
right.
quarterback. So you're like, oh, well, that's great value for the Chiefs. So if you're confident in your guys, then it's definitely worth it in the long run to just go ahead and just fork over the money.
100%. And I think they built a good core around Caleb to hopefully help him produce some fantasy points, but also win them some at least a championship within the next 4 to 8 years. We'll see. But we'll jump into it. Alex, I'll let you go ahead and take the reins. Start off with quarterback.
All right. So one guy I like, a little bit more than ADP, and these aren't like necessarily like deep sleepers or anything. That's all mostly people but I think are getting kind of overshadowed. First
Mhm.
up for quarterback, I went Kyler Murray, currently ADP of QB 8. So in a one QB league, it's like round 6 or 7. So
Mhm.
that's at a position where if you wanted to wait on QB, you've already done 5, 6 rounds of just running back, receiver, maybe a tight end in there. Like your whole starting lineup's filled with studs, and then you bring in Kyler, who's a guy who I think has potential to be a top 5 scoring quarterback. This is a guy who, a little while ago, he did have a year where he finished as QB 2, and then has just had, a lot of injuries. He had 2 years ago only got to play half a season because he had the injury, and then last year he only got to play half a season because he was coming back from the injury. So his career's been a little derailed here, but I think he gets back on track. Still only 26 years old.
Mhm.
I think, now is another year removed from that ACL injury. And because he only played those 8 games last year, I think he didn't have too much wear and tear from last season. So I'm thinking he comes in fresh. They obviously didn't make the playoffs. So it was like very minimal
Right.
action damage that he took. But even the concern, what you like about Kyler is his scrambling, his little guy just running all over the place,
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
concern coming off that ACL injury was, is he still going to be able to run as much? In those 8 games, he averaged 30 yards
Mhm.
rushing, had 3 touchdowns in there. The Cardinals too, as a team, they only went 4-13. They were pretty disappointing. I thought they played pretty tough. They had, they beat the Eagles. There was one of their wins. They
Mhm.
had just the AFC NFC West is just brutal. The Rams and the Niners and Seahawks are pretty decent. So they were just getting beat up. But they went out. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. in the first round. They also got Trey Benson in the third round. And they got Michael Wilson, who I liked as a rookie last year. I thought he's really
I did
solid,
too.
played every game. So
I
him as
agree.
as a in that secondary wide receiver role, I think they have a nice core for Kyler. So I just think he's been derailed. I think this is the year he kind of gets back on track, and I think you can get it at a cheap rate. So I like Kyler, across the board this year.
Yeah, I love Kyler. I love when he scrambles. He looks like a toddler trying to run away from people, like he's got a toy and he's trying to give it up. But I mean, that's the upside that you get with Tyler, right? Or Kyler, excuse me. You get the
Yeah.
running upside, the scramble. I mean, I see him like a poor man Patrick Mahomes with passing, and then a poor man Lamar with running. So he's maybe not number one on all these
Yeah.
categories, but he has the potential to break out, put up a ton of points through the air and on the ground. And, I agree. Kyler is one of my guys for sure going into the season that I'm going to take a look at based off where he's at ADP and even in auction drafts, putting some money on him. So I agree. I like Kyler a lot.
All right. So who you got to kill?
Yeah. So tried and true to my heart, being a Niners fan, I'm going to go with Brock Purdy. He's going late 10th round, QB 11, somewhere around there. 2023 top 6 quarterback. Fantasy stats. So before I give you some other data about Brock Purdy last year, Fantasy Stats did a breakdown to identify what were some of the most efficient stats to determine QB success from a fantasy perspective. And one of the highest indicators was ADOT, or the average depth of target. And essentially that determines how deep the person is throwing the ball, right? Like, are they just throwing dump off, so they're throwing it 2-3 yards, or are they letting it loose and giving some yards to their receiver, 10, 20, 30 yards down the field? So last year he was number 1 in the ADOT score. He averaged right around 9.8 yards per attempt. So number 1 in the league. And this is a crazy stat. So in 2023, 20 plus passing yard attempts, 30 plus pass yard attempts, 40 plus passing yard attempts, and he was top 5 in 50 plus passing yard attempts. So he was number 1 in 20, 30, and 40, and then top 5 in 50. So he's literally slinging the ball, throwing it deep.
And that's like air yards,
Yes,
or just
air
completed
yards.
passes. Okay.
Yeah, air yards. So they're letting him throw the ball, which makes sense, right? First year, he came in a little bit later towards the end of the season. He was their guy, but he was still getting comfortable with the offense, right? The coaches, now they're much more confident in him. They let him throw the ball last year. I don't think people realized how much he threw deep, and that's where Patrick Mahomes saw success, right? Like, that's why everybody loved Mahomes, because he would always chuck it up Tyreek. He would always throw it deep. Last year, though, he was one of the worst in the league at throwing the ball deep because he didn't have any receivers to throw it to, and that showed in his production in Kansas City. So I just love Purdy because of that upside and low draft capital.
I'm kind of curious about this ADOT stat, and if it's like able to like predict future success in any kind of way. Because obviously you say Mahomes had it and then he didn't, and it was kind of like, well, how did you know that was going to happen? Nobody knew that was going to happen. So I mean, obviously it's interesting, but it's like, I'm just curious if there's a way to like kind of hack that data to get better results, which maybe is what you're saying. Maybe Brock Purdy is going to be even crazier this year. But it's like, not that he's can't do it again, but I'm saying like the Niners offense was crazy last year. It's like, I don't know, can they go even crazier? I don't know. I mean, everyone, obviously the weapons around him are nuts.
Right.
But
hasn't changed. Offensive coordinator hasn't changed. Like, the really most thing that they've adjusted is their defensive side of the ball. He still has all the crazy weapons. So I just like, maybe he doesn't throw it as deep as much, but at his value right now, I still think he has a chance. Maybe not top 5 QB, but I think that 5 to 10 range is like really realistic as far as what he's able to produce. So Kyler, for sure, I think you could potentially break top 5. I don't know if Purdy does that, but he's definitely a solid quarterback. I feel like week in and week out
for
with
sure
opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, and that draft capital, I mean, that's nothing. That's peanuts. So it's totally waiting on QB and then getting a guy who's going to lead a top 5 offense in the NFL. So
100%. All right, who you got at running back?
Running back, I want James Cook. He's a guy currently RB 15, usually going around like round 5 overall. And he kind of, last year the big thing with the Bills is when Joe Brady took over, after week 11, their run percentage on plays went from 42% up to 52%. So it was a 10% increase. And in those weeks, James Cook was averaging 20 total touches and 104 total yards. So he's putting up consistent beast numbers. His only downside was on the season, he only had 6 touchdowns and 4 of those were receiving. He only had 2 rushing touchdowns, which is pretty nuts. And honestly, it's because Josh Allen just needs him within that 5-yard mark, and he's like, he's going to make it happen. He's going to put his head down and just bull rush in there. But so I think they've committed to running the ball. They've proven the results, and I think he can still get more touchdowns than he had last year. And then should be a really solid. I'm not like obsessed with the guy. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 running back, but I mean, I think he could crack top 10. And in round 5, I mean, if you were doing like a 0 RB kind of situation, you just went one heavy, with some receivers and some tight ends, you can get a guy who is going to get 20 touches. Yeah, and then round 5 is pretty rare, and I like his value right now.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, and with the 2 rushing touchdowns, he has to have more, right? There has to be, he has to have more than 2 this year. It has to happen, especially if, they're running the ball a little bit more consistently. And we talk about all those targets, last we talked about, 240 targets gone, 2,000 passing yards. I think it was somewhere around 14, 15 touchdowns. And everybody's talking about Kincaid and Keon and, Samuel. Some of those targets are going to go to their veteran offensive weapon, right? Even though he's only 3 years in, James Cook. So I think you'll see an uptick a little bit in maybe receiving. And I agree. I love James Cook. He's one of my guys, tried and true. I got him on a couple of my teams. So I like him. I like him a lot. So for my running back pick, I decided to go with Alvin Kamara. He's going late 5th, early 6th round. He's running back 17, so he's going after James Cook. Here's a guy who last year he was number 3 in targets out of the backfield, and he only played, which was a career low, 13 games last year. Still finished top 15 running
That was
back.
career low, and he's been around
Yeah,
for a while, so
career
that's
low.
good for him.
Yes.
Beast.
People act like he's like 35 years old. He's only 29. He's not that old. I know the cliff is, the 27 to 28 range, so it's a little iffy there. But Kamara is not like every other guy. I think there's some guys like Derrick Henry, that just kind of don't fit the mold of age, like don't got to be worried about. But in those 13 games last year, we talk about consistency, right? Consistency being important. Some guys blow up and then don't do anything for weeks. 10 of those 13 games, he had 12 plus points, and this is half PPR. And then 3 of those 10 games went for 20 plus points. So the upside is there. The consistency is there as well from keeping you in the game, not going to lose you a week. And then I thought this was interesting. Derek Carr has had around 1,100 dropbacks in his career. And of those dropbacks, he's thrown it to a running back about 8 to 9% of the time, 8.8% of the time, which right now is top 3 in the NFL and top 5 in like QB history. So we talk about dump off God, like Derek Carr is going to be the guy to get him the ball. And Kendre Miller, he hurt his hammy at the beginning of camp. He's in year 2. He's going to see a pretty decent amount of time not in these OTAs, which is going to hurt his ability to, steal carries and catches once the season starts, just because he's so young and, you got to build that rapport with coaches and players and stuff like that. So I'm not too worried about that. So that's why he's got my,
I want to
guy.
say, yeah, I mean, he's electric and, always has been. And, everyone remembers that insane fantasy playoff game where he was it 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. It was absolutely bonkers. And as a Bucs fan, I've watched an annoying amount of his work, and he is just so. And I'll say this, as far as like, getting up there in age and like taking hits and stuff like that, like he's so slippery that it's like it's very rare that he gets like rocked. Like, as he just will just kind of like slide over and like, you tackled him, but like he always seems fine. Like nothing ever hurt him. He's just like, yeah, you got me, all right, but I'm gonna pivot over here, pivot over there, and and only take like a little bit of a hit. So I think the age, I think, is not too much of as bad, or at least we'll hope. The problem with age is it just kind of pops out of nowhere. All of a sudden you're like, a guy's just done.
I know.
Like Eckler last year was just done, and nobody like saw it coming. So you never really know when a guy's just like, oh, he just doesn't have it. But I agree. Like if as long as he's keeps playing and keeps getting those dump offs from Carr, I think there's great value there.
Yeah, and PPR, I think even more.
Oh God, yeah, PPR machine, absolutely.
Yeah.
So talking about PPR, let's switch over to receivers. Sticking with my Homer Bucks, I'm taking Chris Godwin. Currently ADP of a wide receiver 33, so typically about like around 7 pick. This is a guy who I feel like the shine has kind of come off of him a little bit. He's had a handful of years now in a row where it doesn't seem like he's really produced as much as what people were hoping for, kind of in his earlier part of his career. So that's why I think he's kind of falling down the boards a little bit. But even so, in these last 3 years that have been disappointments, 1,000 yards every year, 127 targets plus every year, 83 catches plus every the last 3 years. The issue has just been the lack of touchdowns. Last year, he only had three total touchdowns last year, one of which was actually a rushing touchdown. So only 2 receiving, touchdowns last year. That's with 1,000 yards and 83 catches and 127 targets. So just pretty kind of nuts. And part of that is, my main man Mike Evans has just been like an absolute hog. With 13 receiving touchdowns last year. But exciting coming out of camp that they've been talking about using Godwin, pushing him back into this more of a slot role than instead of like
Oh, okay.
the number 2 outside receiver. And that's kind of
Yeah.
in his earlier part of his career, he was predominantly a slot guy. And he did have some slot routes the last couple years, but they've been trying to make an emphasis of utilizing him there, which just better suits his skills, route running, quick cuts. Let him get, he's great running the ball after the catch, a good yak monster. So I'm excited for him. I think, round 7, you pick him up as like wide receiver 3. I think you're happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they, like you said, if they start moving him around the offense and putting him in slot a little bit more, giving him more opportunities to catch and run, right, and use his legs, for sure, I see the upside there. He was just so overshadowed by Mike Evans, last year, and like you said, he never really had that like amazing breakout, or he was tried and true, pretty consistent week in and week out, but there was never that breakout and flashy. So maybe he could be a good pick. For me personally, not too big on Godwin, but you know more about the Bucks than I do, so I'll give it to you there. For me, the wide receiver, this is a little bit different. I'm not just picking one wide receiver. I am picking all of the Tennessee Titans wide receiver core, which sounds crazy. I know, right? I'm not allowed to do that, but I did it. So I'm not going to talk about all these guys. I'm really just mostly going to go ahead.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about all these guys, but Calvin Ridley going 8th, 9th, wide receiver 35, D Hop 10th, 11th, wide receiver 40. Tyler Boyd just not even going drafted. So this is why I like them. So Brian Callahan, he's new coach of Tennessee. He was the Bengals offensive coordinator for 4 years. The Bengals like to throw the ball. He threw the ball at like a 61% pass rate, so he's going to pass the ball. None of his receivers, including the slot receiver, got less than 70 targets. And last year, he was 5th in early down pass concepts. So from a fantasy perspective, that's great because they're passing the ball more. First downs happen more often because they reset the chains for second down. So he's going to throw the ball, and that's evident by all the moves that have been made in this season. So I think Calvin and D-Hop easily see 100-plus targets. If you can pick the right wide receiver 1, we're looking at like 130 to 140 target range, 1,000 yards, maybe 7 touchdowns, maybe plus upside wide receiver 25, wide receiver 20 range. So I just think there's a lot of upside there for a late round wide receiver. And everybody's fading him right now, right? Like the first Titan doesn't come off the board until 7, 8, 9 rounds. So I think it's just a good opportunity late.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to come down to Mayo Man himself, Will Levis.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw some glimpses last year. I mean, he was down to just chuck it, which I appreciated and I enjoyed. It was kind of fun to watch. His accuracy wasn't great, obviously, but
Terrible.
we'll see what happens. I mean, if he gets in a groove, it was only his first year, so if he gets in a groove, he's got nice weapons around him. He has a concept that is down to just throw the ball. So I mean, there's definitely a pathway that could happen that leads to some great results. And that could be a surprise, a very surprising offense.
And I don't think he can get worse, right? Like last year, he was probably one of the worst passing accurate quarterbacks in the league, right?
He did. Of expected starters this year, like he had the worst passing. Other than like some smaller guys who just popped in. But yes, him, and then just above him was your boy Anthony Richardson.
Right. So you can only get a better, we would hope.
Yeah. Okay, so I think all we have left is tight end. I'm gonna keep us in the AFC South, and I'm gonna take Evan Engram of Jacksonville. He's a guy who, well, ADP is only tight end 8, round 9. So this is really just forgetting about tight end until put it on the back burner and scooping him up late. He's a guy that sneakily was tight end 2 last year in half PPR. Over guys like Kelsey and Kittle and McBride. Other than Laporta, he was the best tight end from like on a year-long perspective. The issue, we played every game, most targets of any tight end, most catches of any tight end. He had 7 or more targets in 13 of the games last year. So he's very involved in the offense. The only frustrating part is he only had four touchdowns. So it was kind of like he was always getting catches, getting yards, just never really had very, very few boom games because of only those four touchdowns. And part of that is he was only targeted 9 times in the red zone. But Calvin Ridley was a hog with 25 red zone targets and did very little with him. And that 25 is actually the third most in the NFL last year. So the bad man's gone. Those targets got to go somewhere else. We'll see what happens. Christian Kirk only got, I think, 10 red zone targets, so not much either. So clearly, it's not like they like him more than Evan Ingram's. They did bring in Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas. Maybe stretch the feet. Gabe Davis kind of pulls, keeps the secondary honest, keeps them back, which might open up some spot underneath for Evan Ingram's. Like I said, you're getting the involvement, you're getting the looks. If we can get a couple more touchdowns out of him, then I think you're really getting tight end 5 material in the tight end 8 spot.
Yeah, I mean, I love Evan Ingram as well. The targets from PPR monster. Like his receptions last year, his targets, I think, were number 1 of all tight ends, and I think he had the number 1 target share of tight ends to like 23% for the Jags, and yards after catch. I think he had around like 500 somewhere around there, which was like 50% of his production was from yak yards. So he's a tight end that can get loose. Trevor Lawrence doesn't mind throwing him the ball at any levels of the field, maybe except in the red zone, which hopefully we see a little bit different now that Ridley's gone. But yeah, I love Evan Ingram as well as a late round flyer for tight end. So we're on the same page with that. And rolling into, tight ends, I'm going to pick another Niner, George Kittle. He's going just before Evan Ingram. I know I am. It's just so juicy. ADP middle third, tight end. Sorry, not third, middle 7th-ish. Tight end 7 again, right before Ingram. But I feel like Ingram and Kittle, they're being faded right now because Kincaid hype is off the charts, and so is Pitts. Like these two guys are just hype monsters right now. They're like tight end, I think 5-6 range above these guys, and it's because of all the hype. But Kittle, outside of Travis Kelce, Kittle has been the most reliable tight end. He's, when healthy, he's a top 5 tight end finisher since 2018. Nothing less. So we're talking 6+ years of top 5 tight end production. He averages 10+ points a game. He had over 8 games with that in 2023. 500 yards after catch as well. He was third, only behind Evan Ingram. And going back to that Purdy stat where he was throwing deep balls, 2023, Kittle was number 1 in 10-yard passes, 20-yard passes, 30-yard passes, 40-yard passes, and 50-yard passes reception. So they're getting him the ball, not just in the red zone.
Some of those had to have only been like 1 or 2. How many 40 or 50-yard catches did he have?
You'd be surprised. So 50, I think it was only like 5, and that was tied with what the league had. But some of these other ones were pretty high. And I'll see if I can pull it up real quick. Some of these other targets.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just say I think it's kind of funny because Kittle and Ingram, I kind of almost think of as like polar opposites on the boomer bust spectrum. Like Ingram is just like Mr. Reliable, getting you like, he's going to get targeted 7+ times. He'll probably get like 5 catches for like, 40 yards, and you kind of hope there's a touchdown in there. And then Kittle will have some straight up goose eggs, but then all of a sudden he's capable of a 3-touchdown game out of nowhere, and 100 and something, 150+ yard game out of nowhere, and you're just like, it's just opposite spectrum of the boomer bust kind of cycle. So when I kind of lean a little bit more conservative, I know you like those big games. I kind of like, I want people who just don't get zeros.
Right.
But I do I love Kittle. I love watching the guy. He's a character, and he seems to really just enjoy the game. So it kind of makes you want to root for him, which is always fun.
Yeah, and I think that's Shanahan, right? He schemes around the teams that he's playing. So Kittle can go from the most relevant person on the field to not important because they're scheming around the tight end, right? They're not throwing the ball there.
Or
Scheming
they
around
just want to utilize
linebackers,
his
safeties.
blocking. And they're like, hey,
Right.
you got to
Yep.
match up well against their outside linebacker. Just pummel that guy. Chip the defensive end, and then move up to the outside linebacker.
Exactly. So I think that has to do with some of those boomer bust games. But all right, so 50-yard passes was only 2. All right, and there wasn't a whole lot of them, that tight ends that got it. So 40-yard passes was 3. Again, not a whole lot, but
Hey,
let's just look at the
hey,
30 and 20.
he's capable of them, and that's all we ask.
Yes. Yeah. And 8-30, 18-20, which again, so all top.
I don't think
so.
At his current age, I don't think Travis Kelce is capable of like a 40 or 50 yarder anymore. He's
What?
He's like, I'm gonna do my
I'm
gonna do my 15-yard seam and just crush this 15-yard seam route every time, which is just magically always open. I don't know how, but yeah, I appreciate Kittle's athleticism to get down the field that much.
For sure. So that's our top, and we can run through it again. So Alex, you want to run through your 4 again?
Yeah, in the QB spot, I like Kyler Murray at his value.
Mhm.
And then the running backs, I had James Cook. Wide receiver, I had Chris Godwin. And then tight end, I had Evan Ingram.
And then for me, quarterback Brock Purdy, running back Alvin Kamara, wide receiver all of the Titans wide receiver team, and then tight end George Kittle. So I think all of our picks were pretty solid ADP value wise, high upside, high consistency from a lot of our guys. So I like them.
Yeah, I think we did good about picking guys who had proven they can do it before. It's not just like flash in the pan. Like this isn't like just like a wild sleeper that you're just like, maybe this could happen. It's guys who have proven they can. Maybe just certain situations kind of prevented them, and then they can just get things back on track. They can hopefully yield some nice results.
100%. It's value, all about value, especially when you're drafting. Try not to reach on players. Try not to take guys that too early, especially if they're not going to produce for you. So for sure. All right. Well, those are the guys that we like. Let us know who you agree with, who you don't agree with us. Connect with us on Twitter, Discord, email. Shoot us an email at team@syndicatefantasy.com. We will, if you ask a question, we will answer it on the pod. So just shoot us an email, connect with us, let us know, and we'll answer your question. So until next time, go steal a championship, and we'll catch you later.
Peace.